Brilliant. We're doing good? Awesome. All right, I'm coming over here. So you've met the better looking half. Only just a little bit better looking. So just making sure I'm in the right place. All right. Brilliant. All right, I'm not going to keep you too long today. I actually want to talk to you very quickly about momentum. Momentum is a very interesting thing. We all would love to have great momentum in life. And whether you know it or not, you have momentum in your life. It could be negative momentum where you're not going anywhere, you're spiraling in the opposite direction from what you want. Or it could be positive momentum that's really taking you somewhere into what you really want to, what you're believing for and what you really want to accomplish. So I've done a lot of research on momentum. It's a very interesting thing. When I'm talking about momentum, it talks about this idea of something that is an impetus that impels an activity or response. So it's something that gets the ball rolling, right? So momentum is a very interesting thing, and then it's got an intrinsic value to it, that once it gets rolling, it keeps rolling. It's because there's an intrinsic energy that comes and it keeps moving. So, but then, that's momentum in something that's actually moving. And then there's momentum in things like ideas and concepts and things that happen in your world and in society. And when they talk about momentum, many experts agree that momentum is something that's a little bit ethereal. It's a bit hard to know what it really is. It's a bit hard to put your finger on what is momentum. It's it's tangible, but it's not tangible. Who knows what I'm talking about? Like, you can tell when someone's got momentum, but you can't tell what it is. But they've got it, because when they've got it, they've got it. So I've always said, for many years I've taught on this subject, and I've always said you've got to create it, you've got to capture it, and then you've got to continue in it. I call it the 3 C's of momentum. And then I did a whole stack of research last year, and I found that there's a lot of people in the business world who talk about the idea of momentum in business, and they talk about this idea of new, improved, and improving. New, improved, and improving. And so what they say is this: you can't create momentum by just tweaking something old. Can we just take the edge off that a bit? That's just way too... Can anyone hear me all right? Because I don't want to blow your head off, but I figure if it's blowing my head off, it must be pretty close to blowing your head off. So, you can't create momentum without something new. You can't get something old and tweak it and hope to create momentum out of it. In order to create momentum in your life, you have to do something new. You will not create momentum without doing something new. So, and there's a big difference between like sideways movement and forwards movement. If you can tweak something, you can create sideways movement, you won't create forward movement. Is this making sense? All right, I tell you, you're really awake today. It's brilliant. Okay, it is summer here. That's right. Okay. So first you got to do something new. You got to create it. Then you got to capture it. So you got to improve on it. In order to capture momentum, you've got to improve on it. So you've got to make it better than what it was the first time. So each week, in a church sense, if you're talking about church or you're talking about your life, no matter what it is, no matter where you're going to apply this, you've got to keep improving it. You've got to keep tweaking it, keep moving forward with it, keep making it better so that it creates some momentum in your life and in what you're doing. So that's how you begin to capture it, and then you've got to continue in it. That's the real fun part. How do we continue in momentum? And that's where you've just got to have this constant, ongoing, never-ending, improving cycle. So I want to look at a biblical application of this. I want to look at the Israelites wandering around in the desert, the Moses generation, moving from the Moses generation to the Joshua generation. It wasn't really the Joshua generation, actually it was a generation afterwards, but he happened to be the one that was leading them. And so I want to look at how they they created something new in order to grab a hold of what God had for their life. These guys, you got to understand, for 40 years they had wandered in a nomadic and a nomadic state, eating the same food, wearing the same clothes, in the same desert, just wandering around nomadically from place to place, never ending, never stopping, just same. How's life? Same. How's life? Brilliant. Same. What'd you have for breakfast? Same. What'd you have for dinner? Same. I mean, I think initially when bread fell from heaven, I'm sure when manna fell from heaven the first time, I would have thought that was brilliant. But after about 20 years of it, I reckon that they were had run out of recipes for bread in the morning. Who knows what I'm talking about? It was just same, never ending. Same clothes, same shoes. Women, same shoes. Can I say that again? Same shoes. You don't need another pair. Look, it's biblical. 40 years, same shoes. You don't need any more. My wife, she tells me, she goes shopping and she gets, always gets bargains, wherever there's a sale sign, it's like jackpot, and then she comes home and she's spent money on the Visa card and she tells me how much she saved me. And I said, how can you say you've saved me anything? You spent money on the Visa card. I have money spent. Where is the saving? It's not going forwards, it's going backwards. But she saved me money. And then I allowed her to talk to Anna this week, and then Anna was explaining how when she saves money, she says, that's more money I've got to spend. And I said, just stay away from my wife. Just stay away, because that's just wrong. So these guys experienced what I would call negative momentum for 40 years. I mean, 40 years of broken dreams, unfulfilled expectations, 40 years of believing for the great promise of God, 40 years of wondering when their day was going to come, 40 years of hopes and dreams just washing in the wind and just flying by. Same. When years ago, a couple of years back, I was in Malaysia, and Malaysia's a funny place. It's like the counterfeit capital of the world. I mean, it's an amazing thing. Like we laugh. We often laugh there. You speaking there, and you say, by the time because they bootleg everything, right? And you say, look, by the time you finish, they'll have this recorded on a DVD that will look real, and they'll be selling it on the street by the time before you've even walked out the door. And John and I were actually joking about this one day, and someone came up to us and said, "Oh, the DVDs are almost ready," and we just burst out laughing. And we said to him one day, "Hey, look, we want to get a watch. We want to get we want to get this particular watch." One of the guys that was with us wanted a particular watch, and this guy said to us, "Yeah, I can take you to a place." He said, "I can take you to a place. You get it really cheap." And they said, "Or I can take you to another place, a little bit more expensive, almost real." And I went, almost real? What does that mean? Almost real. And see, that's how some of us live sometimes. Almost real. That's how these guys were living. 40 years. Almost real. Almost. Just a touch away from the possibility of what God had for their life. Just a river to cross to get to a place where they could literally be in the promise of God. But just almost real. But they had lived with this negative momentum. A day came. Something happened. Joshua chapter 1 starts with this. It says, after the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, verse 2, listen to this. Moses, my servant, is dead. What an interesting thing for God to say. It sounds like he's stating the obvious, right? As if they didn't know Moses was dead. I mean, they all went to the funeral. They knew Moses was dead, right? It was a big deal, okay? He'd led them for 40 odd years. It was a big deal. Moses was dead, right? And so, but here God comes to the next person who's ready to go. He says, Moses, my servant, is dead. And he says, now then, you and all these people, get ready to cross the Jordan River into the land I'm about to give them, to the Israelites. I want to quickly give you, just from these few verses, I want to give you 6 principles on momentum, real quick. Okay, number 1, if you're going to build momentum in your life, number 1, change your thinking. We have to change our thinking, right? He says, Moses, my servant, is dead. The old is finished. The old is over. Whatever was a restriction to him is no longer a restriction to you. Whatever was a thing that would stop him from grabbing momentum and taking hold of what God had, that is not going to stop you. Moses is dead. The frustration and the limitation of the previous generation is gone. Because that's what it represented. That's what God was talking about. And he's saying, you're going to do something new. He's saying, your moment has arrived. Moses is dead. You've got to understand, Joshua had served Moses for 40 years. More than that. And so he's saying, Moses is dead. It's your time. And the reason I'm talking about this today is I actually believe something new is about to take place. And if something new is about to take place, we need to understand how to capture it. We need to understand how to continue in it so that we can get all the momentum of what God's going to do. Is this making sense? This moment was 40 years in the making, but it was a moment. Moses is dead. The old is gone. Some of us walk into a place like this and we think, we carry all the baggage of the past. One day in our church back home, I had we get house bricks. We built a house out of brick, unlike you guys, just sticks and stones and stuff, but we have house bricks, and a good solid house brick is quite a heavy thing, and so I got a bunch of house bricks and I wrote all different things on them, rejection, bitterness, loneliness, all different things, negativity, and cynicism, and I just piled this big pile of bricks up. And then I got this young guy up and I said, just put this big backpack on. He had this massive backpack on, and I said, sorry, Matt, just run around for a while. And he just was running around, everything. I was doing all fine because it was empty and there was nothing. I said, right now, and now you're going to carry a bit of baggage. Now some negativity is coming on your life. And I plonked a house brick in it. And then some cynicism's coming on your life, because cynicism and negativity, cynicism is negativity's best friend, right? So I just dropped some cynicism in there, and then I started to fill that sucker up. And then by the end, it was an occupational health and safety issue, because we had to get people helping him. He could hardly move, poor kid. And but that's what some of us are like. We're still carrying the baggage of the old stuff. And if you're going to create momentum in your life, you've got to say, hey, Moses is dead. That stuff that's been gripping my life and holding me back and stopping me from moving forward, that stuff is over. Does that make sense? All right, number 2, second thing, turn our talk into walk. They had talked about this for 40 years. They had talked about the possibility of crossing the promised land for 40 years. They had talked about the maybes of God. Maybe our day will come. Maybe we will go and, we're going to see this promise be fulfilled. Maybe something's going to, maybe. This is what God says to him. He says, verse 3 goes on, he says, I will give you every place where you set your foot, as I promised Moses. Your territory, in verse 4, will extend. So what's he saying? He's saying, hey, not only is Moses dead, but it's your turn to turn your talk into walk. We've talked about it for long enough. Now it's time to go put your foot on it. Some of us are sitting and waiting for the promise of God to come to us, but it doesn't work like that. You've got to go to it. You've got to take the step. Many of us, we say, oh God, you show and then I'll go. And God says, no, you go and I'll show. And then you say, no, God, show and I'll go. Because it's safer that way, right? But God says, no, go and I'll show. So quite often, just about everything I've ever accomplished in life has been because